Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Laura Prada from the Telesur Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with our news. You stay with us. We begin with our news. In Ecuador, the indigenous protesters have released the police officers who had been detained in the Ecuadorian National Cultural Center. Women led the march to deliver the police officers over the various human rights organizations in Ecuador, including the Ecuadorian Ombudsman Office and the United Nations Office in Ecuador. They had spent a day in the building, which is being used as a focal point by the indigenous protesters. And workers at some of Ecuador's oil fields in Amazonia have walked out in support of the strike against the government's measures. These are oil installations in El Coca, the capital of Orellana province, where workers attacked an occupation and the police tried to remove them. Ecuador's state oil company Petroecuador has cut its output to 30% because of the protests, and told clients it will not be able to fulfill its contracts.
To the Minister of Defence, these police officers were detained simply because they infringed the space we were using. But like us, the police officers will be going home. The government wouldn't release them. The armed forces wouldn't, nor the police. While our young people have been detained safely, we were beaten and badly treated and killed. That's painful for us. It breaks our hearts. We've come here for just one reason. We've come to fight for our rights. To fight against this neoliberal government that has given itself over to the International Monetary Fund. There's only one person to blame, Lenin Moreno. The International Monetary Fund kills people all across the world.
And the government of Ecuador has not given any recent figures from the victims of the violent repressions, but human rights organizations circulated unofficially the following numbers on Thursday morning. This information are that are 7 dead, including a 1-month-old baby, 95 people seriously injured, and 500 others with minor injuries. They are also reported that 83 protesters have disappeared, including 47 minors. In all, over 800 people have been arrested, most of them held at police stations or military bases. Among them, 26 politicians have also been jailed. 13 journalists have been jailed, and another 57 have been attacked by the police. And 9 media organizations have been raided. There are also reports of 14 Venezuelans being arbitrarily detained, even though they were not taking part of any protests. And Ecuador's main indigenous organizations have said there are no negotiations with the government and their struggle will continue. Jaime Vargas, the president of CONAIE, said there could be no solution until the repression ends and the ministers responsible are brought to justice. The economic measures are repealed and the IMF gets out of Ecuador. 3 indigenous protesters were killed on Wednesday.
With the blood of our brothers, we are not going to negotiate any agreement with this de facto, lying, thieving government. This government, this gentleman, Lenin Moreno, should go to prison for his crimes against our brothers. Mr. Policeman, you have a heart, you have a brain. You are human beings like us. We are all the people. You must not be murderers. We are your brothers. We struggle for our cause and our children.
And the Venezuelan president on Thursday answered and condemned the neoliberal and capitalist model of the International Monetary Fund, which they intend to impose on all Latin American, Caribbean peoples and countries.
The International Monetary Fund that wants to impose models of savage capitalism, excluding capitalism that does not accept the right to public education of the peoples. The IMF is the instrument to impose the model of neocolonial exploitation of the peoples of the South, peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean.
And in other topics, President Maduro also highlighted progress made so far by Venezuela and said that the people from the country will continue resisting against imperialism.
In the process of resistance to imperialism, we are more beautiful than they are in the heart, and in reality and advance. A little today, a little tomorrow, and every day.
And now we move on to the Caribbean. In Cuba, National Assembly has elected Miguel Díaz-Canel as the president of the Republic, a post restored under the new constitution. And a special session of the National Assembly of People's Power voted 579 in favor of the 59-year-old leader. Up until now, Díaz-Canel has held the post of President of the Council of State, a position which disappears with the reforms introduced to the Constitution. Meanwhile, Salvador Valdés Mesa was re-elected as Vice President of the country, and Esteban Lazo Hernández was also re-elected as President of the National Assembly of Cuba.
Considering the results given, I declare the Congressman Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez is elected as the President of the Republic of Cuba.
After his re-election, Miguel Díaz-Canel spoke to and ratified his support under the new constitution, and he said that his priority in this new period will be the defense and economic stability of the island.
The revolution is a fight for the future. It always has been and it is now. A sustainable economy will be the basis for the future.
And also in his speech, Díaz-Canel denounced the role played by international organizations under direction from the world's biggest powers to undermine the interests of the peoples fighting for their own self-determination and independence, like the cases of Cuba and Venezuela.
In a world undermined by the imbalance of economic relations without shock absorbers for the least developed nations, a world has come to use the podium of the UN assembled to discredit and undermine governments in order to support interventions of all kinds, including military.
Díaz-Canel also ratified his commitment to work in order to promote talent formed by the revolution and open doors of cooperation with other peoples of the world.
I am committed to making the talent formed by the revolution flourish, to lead, and to open the doors for collaboration. We are working for the future. This year, and particularly in recent months, they have put our capacity of resistant development to test.
And in order to have more details about this extraordinary session of the National Assembly and what comes next, we have the following report from our correspondent in Havana, Alien Fernandez. Welcome, Alien.
The new President of the Republic, Miguel Díaz-Canel, dealt with two particularly important areas in his speech. Firstly, on international relations, and secondly, on domestic Cuban issues. On the first, he condemned the recent attacks and hostility from Washington towards Cuba, and he lamented everything being done against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela to undermine the legitimate government of President Nicolas Maduro, including the use of the United Nations to demonize those governments who are committed to the poor. On the domestic front, he said the priority is the economy to support the country's social system, and also the defense of the country. The President now has 3 months to propose who should take up the new role of Prime Minister, as well as the positions of Vice Premiers and regional governors.
Thank you, Alien. And like this, we go to a first break here from the South. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Telesur English and on my account at Laura P. Telesur. You stay with us. Back with our news, Ghana's state prosecutor has charged 9 people with treason after they were accused of plotting to overthrow the government. They were arrested last month for allegedly plotting to seize key state installations with the aim of overthrowing President Nana Akufo-Addo. According to the state prosecutor, the accused were part of a group known as Take Action Ghana and had planned to stage a series of protests with the purpose of destabilizing the country. The prosecutor added that the group engaged the services of a local blacksmith to manufacture pistols and explosives to enable them to execute their plan. And in Malawi, protesters have blocked the main road to the capital Lilongwe to prevent people from attending the president's first rally after his re-election. A wave of protests disputing the election results have gripped the capital since Peter Mutharika was declared president back in the month of May. Protesters have been calling for the resignation of the head of the Electoral Commission, accusing her of manipulating the presidential results. On Tuesday, police officers was stoned to death during clashes between opposition and ruling party supporters. So far, 12 people have been arrested, accused of breaking the peace.
Political leaders should get to a negotiating table to discuss what is happening and prepare the supporters of the outcome of the court case. People are getting hurt and more will get hurt.
It is regrettable. You know, every individual, every Malawian has got the right to live. Whether it is a member of the opposition, whether it is a member of the ruling party, whether it is a police officer, whether it is any person.
And Tunisia's Islamist party Ennahda, led the Rishd Ghannouchi, has stopped the legislative polls with 52 seats, but fell short of the majority required to form government. Presidential candidate Nabil Karoui Skalton's party came second with 38 seats, while independent candidates has scooped 33 seats. And Rwanda will need to negotiate a coalition deal with other parties to be able to run the country for the next 5 years. On Sunday, retired law professor Kais Said faces Karoui in the second round of the presidential elections. And the World Health Organization, the WHO, says that the Ebola epidemic has been squeezed into a much smaller geographic area in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The epidemic has killed more than 2,000 people since August 2018, causing the WHO to declare it as an international public health emergency.
Populations, and at this point we have to ensure that we push the virus completely out of the human population, and we need to do that as quickly as we can, while being very careful to continue to keep the community on board and to protect our staff and ensure our staff have the proper enabling environment in which to do their work safely.
And the Nigerian Senate has introduced an anti-sexual harassment bill that seeks to prevent the victimization of university students. This follows a media investigation which exposed widespread sexual misconduct by multiple lecturers at 2 top West African universities. The bill proposes a prison term of between 5 and 14 years for lecturers who have a sexual relationship with their students. Once passed, it will also be illegal for lecturers to make sexual advances towards students. And now we move on to Latin American and Caribbean news. Hundreds of students in Colombia have marched to demand university autonomy, their right to protest, and the release of agreed funds to the student sector. The mobilizations started early across the whole country, and in the capital, Bogota, hundreds of students marched on the Congress Town Hall and Supreme Court of Justice, all in Bolivar Square. The demonstrators demanded that the government accept the agreements made last December in order to invest around $1.3 million in public universities over the next 3 years. They are also calling for the right to peaceful protest, to be respected, university autonomy, and against corruption. And hundreds of migrants took control of a border bridge between Mexico and the United States in order to demand Washington to facilitate the asylum process. protesters blockaded the bridge which links Matamoros in Mexico with Brownsville in Texas. Civilians have been stranded in Mexican territory for several months due to the White House migration policy. They are prevented from crossing the border. Migrants are demanding that the acceleration of the U.S. asylum process, stating that their only intention is to get a better life quality.
That they gave us a solution because we don't want to be here. We have been here almost over 2 months already. I have the second appointment, but the real issue is that there are people there who go twice for the second appointment time. Then they have to go to the next further appointment. So the question is, what is going to happen to us? If we are told to wait and wait much longer, where would we supposed to go then?
I have a special child to whom I need to buy a splint and get him through. I have to give studies to my daughter who is here with me, and that is what I want the most. I want to go working to the United States. We have no intentions to cause inconveniences to anyone. We simply know that the United States is a very large and prosperous country.
Now to the Caribbean, several ports of Trinidad and Tobago, including the capital port of Spain, have flooded after persistent rainfall. Rising floodwaters in the capital reportedly left many trapped in their workplaces. The flash flooding was as a result of the passage of the Intertropical Convergence Zone. An adverse weather alert, yellow level, has been in effect since early Wednesday morning. In Antigua and Barbuda, opposition leader of the United Progressive Party, Harold Lovell, and two other former cabinet ministers, Wilmoth Daniel and Hwan Ki Kim, have been charged with corruption, fraud, and embezzlement. The decision comes more than 2 years after a magistrate dismissed a case against them in relation to buses that were donated to the government during their administration. The judge had ruled that the evidence was scant, to say at the least. It is alleged that they converted 3 Daewoo buses worth more than $600,000 that had been donated by the government of South Korea for their personal use. And CARICOM continues to demand reparations for the suffering inflicted by the Atlantic slave trade, while also examining the challenges to the region's economic and political independence posed by the international finance systems and the current debt crisis in the region. Caribbean leaders are discussing these concerns at a CARICOM reparation forum currently underway in Antigua and Barbuda.
We cannot forget that our European oppressors not only exploited us, but left us all in a condition of extreme poverty, mass illiteracy, inadequate health and educational institutions, and a pandemic of chronic debilitating NCDs deriving from centuries of excess salt and sugar consumption. Now, the Europeans utilize an inhumane model, what I consider to be a brutal extractive economic model, to control the Caribbean as a zone of wealth creation to fund their own development.
Time for a second and very short break. You stay tuned with us.
Discover the cultural diversity that defines a continent. The place where art and tradition are part of the same nucleus. Artistic expressions, values, real life. Fridays, only on this world.
We are back with our information. We begin in Turkey because President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has rejected international criticism of his country's military operations in northeast Syria, as he reported on the progress of the second day since Turkish troops entered the Kurdish-controlled territory.
Since the beginning of the operation, 109 terrorists have been killed so far, just like all the other operations carried out by Turkey. The aim of the Peace Spring is to contribute to Syria's territorial and political integrity. Saudi Arabia should look into the mirror. Who brought Yemen to this state? Look at its current condition. Did tens of thousands of people not die in Yemen? Hey, Saudi Arabia, give account for this first.
Erdogan's word come a day after the Turkish military arrived at the Syrian border. A military convoy reached Syria and drove along the border, crossing into the northern side of the country. This marked the beginning of ground operations after having attacked Kurdish militia positions in northeast Syria with air strikes and artillery barrage in a cross-border military operation. And all this just days after United States troops pulled back from the area. Meanwhile, police have detained at least 5 protesters in Diyarbakir, the largest city in the mainly Kurdish southeast Turkey, for criticizing the military attack against Kurdish militia in northeast Syria. Police used water cannons to disperse the gatherings, which was initially called against the ousting of elected mayors of the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party, but it turned into a protest against the Turkish military operation in Syria. A senior Kurdish official has warned that Islamic State militants could break out of prisons in northeast Syria after one of the prisons was bombed by Turkish planes.
One of the prisons in which the ISIS prisoners are kept under the control of Syrian Democratic Force was bombed by Turkish warplanes yesterday, and probably some of the ISIS members have escaped from this prison. We want an urgent intervention on this crisis, and these attacks should be stopped immediately. The airspace should be closed for Turkish flights that bombing attacks, air attacks can be stopped. And all European states should freeze their relations by withdrawing their ambassadors from Turkey immediately.
And Ireland's Prime Minister Leo Varadkar has struck a more positive tone than other European leaders on a possible Brexit deal, coming out of what he called a very positive meeting with his British counterpart Boris Johnson. The Irish leader expressed confidence that the Brexit deal was still possible by October 31st, and he says both he and Johnson do see a pathway to an agreement in the coming weeks. However, Varadkar said there still remain 2 issues to be ironed out, ensuring that any long-term agreement has the consent of the people of Northern Ireland and that there's no customs border on the island of Ireland.
Yeah, as I say, we agreed not to get into the details of any proposals or discussions made, but on the timeline question, I think it is possible for us to come to an agreement to have a treaty agreed to allow the UK to leave the EU in an orderly fashion and to have that done by the end of October. But there is many a slip between cup and lip and lots of things that are not in my control.
And like this, we come to the end of News Just Brief. Remember, you can find this and much more other information on our website, telesterenglish.net, where you can find opinion articles, watch special interviews, and of course, find so much more information of the special coverage we are making of topics like what the protests in Ecuador. So always stay with us with Telesur, connecting our global thoughts. Until next time, thank you for watching.